Welcome to Gleaning and Gathering. My name is Eric Heimlich, and I'm your host. And today I'd like to talk a little bit about leadership culture. It's an interesting topic. It's one I'm chewing on, and I just had a few thoughts that I wanted to share. You know, leadership is changing in the generation in which we live. There's a generation past that for them, George Patton, the great general during World War II, kind of was the one who was their model for leadership, if you will. You know, it's very top down. This is what you're going to do. There's a famous story about George Patton. I can't verify it, but I heard, and that is that he called in the Army chaplain and demanded that he get them good weather for D-Day. And the chaplain said, "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't order God to do anything." And he, a couple more times, castigated the chaplain, and at the end of telling him that he better get them good weather for D-Day, he said, "If you can't even get me good weather, then what the H good are you?" You know, and I think that there's a lot of people, unfortunately, that look at the church today in that same way. They see the church as something to be used, and God is a lucky rabbit's foot, and so we're going to get God to do stuff for us. Anyway, that's a general George Patton story. But his idea that teamwork is everybody else doing what I tell them to do, and this is leadership. You know, you force people, you coerce them, you do whatever you got to do to make it happen. And so, you know, whether it's John Wayne, whether it's George Patton, Winston Churchill would be another great example. These very powerful leaders who, by their sheer force of presence, motivate people, move them, push them, whip them, do whatever they've got to do to make it happen. That's a leadership model that was highly respected in the past generation. And there's certainly, I think, a case to be made that leaders like that did some really great work and made important contributions to the world. So I'm not denigrating it, but I am saying that we live in a new day, and a day where that style of leadership is no longer accepted and is no longer embraced. And so I see leaders who have learned, maybe they're not the George Patton type, but they've learned from George Patton types. And so now they're leading, and they're leading in a way that is Patton-esque, and they're struggling in this new generation because in this generation, there is a sense in which you're not going to tell me what to do, but I can be convinced, but you're going to have a conversation. We're going to have to talk about this, and you're going to have to make your case that this is really what should be done. And it's not that people today are necessarily more rebellious than they've ever been, but I think there is a degree to which we mistrust leaders and institutions at a level that we've never mistrusted them before. The level to which high-level leaders have failed, and failed miserably, and failed catastrophically, and the way in which that has led people to have to pick up the pieces afterward and examine and soul search and say, why did we do this? And why did we allow this person to have so much power? I think has led us to a place in our society in general where leadership is suspect. It's not going to be anymore that you can just tell them this is what we're going to do, and everyone just nods their head in agreement and follows right along. This is not going to happen. Not in a healthy organization. And I don't think it's the way that it ever should have been. I do think that in a multitude of counselors, there's safety. And I think that many times the best solutions come when you have people looking at things from multiple perspectives and giving input, and then a leader is able to take that information and that more complete picture and make a decision that takes into account a lot of things that they wouldn't have taken into account if it hadn't been for those inputs. I'm seeing a new generation of leaders that build coalitions and that endeavor to listen well, that seek first to understand and then to be understood. They're a group of leaders who are aware of their own weaknesses and also their strengths, and bring people onto their team that are better at some things than they are. And so I'm encouraged by the future of what I see. I see lots of great young leaders emerging. Some of those that I just really admire. One is Matt Hallam. Matt is doing some incredible work. I should say Dr. Matt Hallam, because he's got an earned doctorate. But he's doing some incredible work there at God's Bible School and College in the area of recruitment. He has done that not by doing the work himself, but by building a really talented, competent team around him that is doing the work. And he's empowered them. And having worked with him in another setting, I love Pastor Matt. He pastored here at the Gathering at Victory Acres, was the founding pastor here, and just really, really value the relationship, but getting to see him up close and personal as a leader and as someone that would take time out of a very busy schedule to sit down and listen to me and take input from me and use that input many times to make changes or make things better, or at least pacify me, even if it didn't make things better. But I saw him as a pastor, as a leader, after everyone else was done. At the end of the day, he was the one many times who was sweeping the floor and cleaning up and tearing things down while everyone else was fellowshipping around him. He was the one who was there early setting up. He was the one who, as a servant leader, modeled the kind of activity that all of us should be aspiring to. And I watched that. As we met in our open air pavilion here at Victory Acres, and he poured his heart out and gave really great messages each and every week. He didn't just show up with something canned, something that he had just, gotten off the shelf, but he showed up with fresh truth and he shared it and he built the team and he was selfless. That really spoke to me. And so, Matt's one of those guys that is talented, is gifted, is thoughtful, but he's someone who builds a team around him, and he's done that wherever he's gone. And so I'm sure that God has some incredible things in store still for his life, but the way in which he leads his family, the way in which he leads his teams, the way in which he just models the kind of life for those around him is just something that has really impressed me. Another leader that has impressed me is Brother Adam Buckler, president of Union Bible College, and the way in which he has come in and really built the school in a way that some have disagreed with. When he decided to paint all the buildings, I know there were a lot of people that were upset about that, but he made a decision and he moved forward with it. And he has continued to listen well to the alumni, to the faculty, to those that are around him. And from my perspective, is doing a tremendous job in building a school and developing the kind of place that people want to be part of, building a culture that is going to endure really for the long haul. And I think that's one of the things that I see about leadership today, is that really what a leader has to do is develop the culture around them. I remember one of my mentors, Darren Campbell, who is the CEO of Slingshot. He started Tree of Life books back many years ago, and he and I were friends and would meet together and talk about a lot of different things, but learned a lot from Darren and really value his input in my life. But one of the things that he said to me was that, you're going to have to recruit people that don't necessarily have the same level of competence that you have or the same passion that you have for a particular thing. But you've got to be willing to accept a certain level of mediocrity. Not everybody's going to be the best at what they're doing. And yet at the same time, as the leader, you need to be the one who's modeling the culture for them. Not like this. I don't want it to be like this. I want it to be like this. And I saw wherever Darren went, that was the work that he did, was he was building a culture. And so he was attracting a tribe to that saw life in a very similar way to the way that he saw it, but had very eclectic gifts and abilities. And so he was building this tribe of people around this vision that he had. And so that was, I really think, the key to a lot of his success. I think also leaders today have to be people who look at life realistically. There are a lot of people who talk about visionary leadership. I know there was a time in my life when maybe I could have been classified as a visionary leader. I don't consider myself so much that anymore. I've had some visions of things that could happen and things that could be done and still do. But many times the challenge that I faced was I could see X, Y, Z. But in terms of being able to take that, hey, I would love to see it look like this, and then execute it at A, B, C, and D, that was the challenge. Anybody can spin up a pipe dream, but unless you can show people how they can actually go through the alphabet until we actually arrive at X, Y, and Z, you're kind of in a spot where you're not really leading. You're just, spinning up a good tale. And there are lots of millennials today that, they've got all kinds of great ideas, but no work ethic to make it happen. And it's a real challenge because at the end of the day, ideas don't get things done. You have to have a system, you have to have people, you have to have some level of competence to be able to actually take an idea and execute it. It's one of the reasons why I really appreciate Scott Belsky's book, Making Ideas Happen. He uses an illustration in there. And one is James Patterson, who has produced huge amounts of printed material. And he's got books constantly in the works. And Thomas Kincaid, who has sold thousands and thousands and thousands of paintings. And yet both of them are really derided by the creative community because their work is not original enough. And so there are a lot of people that, think, hey, you need to create one-of-a-kind works. And they basically make fun of Patterson and make fun of Thomas Kincaid because they're creatives, but they just churn out such an amazing amount of material, a lot more than most creatives, and have done very well financially as a result of it. And I think that many times, if we're not careful as leaders, we get stuck because we're not willing to allow done to be perfect. I'm not talking about doing things in a shoddy way, but what I am talking about is recognizing that a person who actually gets something done and I don't have to be the one to do it is probably more valuable than me doing something and then having to be the one that does it perfectly, because there's only so much I can do. And so if you're going to delegate, if you're going to bring people on your team, if you're going to have them be a part, you're going to have to be willing to allow a certain level of mediocrity, a certain level of production that's lower perhaps than what you would do if you were doing it yourself. Because 20% of something is better than 100% of nothing. And so if you're willing to go ahead and work with that, then you can continue to raise that productivity level. If you've got to do everything and the only way that anything ever gets done is if you do it, you're probably never going to get very much done because there's only so many hours in your day and there's only so much that you are capable of actually making happen. And so the only way forward really as a leader is if we build our team and we build our tribe, we build people that are a part of our organization in such a way that we continue to grow our capacity as a team to move forward. That's the level of leadership that I see being most helpful and productive today. And the leaders that I see are leaders who are leading teams, and they're leading them well, and they're taking good care of their people. And in taking care of their people are taking care of business. And I was talking with a successful businessman a while back, and he is a businessman who's built a very, very successful business over the past 20 plus years. But he has chosen not to scale. He has chosen to really kind of hone in on a level for his small business, for his, I would say, medium-sized business. That is what he is comfortable with. And he has then taken his focus and said, I want to add value to my team. And he takes good care of his people. In fact, his company is well known for taking great care of their people in an industry that is completely the opposite. It's a construction type industry, and most of the time the construction type personnel, you use them, you lose them, that kind of thing. They just use people up. And yet what he's done is he has really invested in his people, and he built a building out behind his house, and it's for fellowship and get-togethers, and it's a family type business. And he's really all about trying to help his guys and develop their marriages and help them develop their families and help them grow strong. And it's just a beautiful thing. I love what he's doing. And for him, he said, I'm not saying customers first. In my business, I put my people first, because I know that it's my people that are going to take care of my customers. And if I am really taking care of my people in the right way, then my customers will be taken care of. I wish more leaders would understand that. Really taking care of our people is our first priority. And so whether your business is a small business with 5 employees, or whether you're responsible for 500 people, whether you're working in a church setting or whether you're working in a corporate business type setting, taking care of your people and making sure that you are adding value to them and developing them at every level is so important. And it is the way forward. It's the way I believe that leaders today have to lead. There's a whole pile of books that highlight this topic, but a few of my favorites are The 5 Disfunctions of a Team by Patrick Lencioni. Great book that really highlights where teams get it wrong. And I think it's a book that you would find helpful if you're interested in this. Also, Team of Teams, New Rules of Engagement for a Complex World by General Stanley McChrystal. Great book, and a book that I think is incredibly helpful. An older book by Stephen Covey called The Speed of Trust, the one thing that changes everything. And it's been around many years, but it's another book on this topic. John Maxwell, The 17 Indisputable Laws of Teamwork. Embrace them and empower your team. There's some good stuff there. Simon Sinek, or Sinek, I think, Sinek, Leaders Eat Last, Why Some Teams Pull Together and Others Don't. There's a great discussion in there, particularly about millennial issues. And so there's some great thinking there. Another book that I've enjoyed recently, How We Built a Workplace People Love. It's called Joy Incorporated by Richard Sheridan. It's been around a few years, published in 2013, but a great book nonetheless. Another book, Multipliers, How the Best Leaders Make Everyone Smarter by Liz Wisweman. And then the last one is Tribal Leadership, Leveraging Natural Groups to Build a Thriving Organization by Dave Logan, John King, and Halee Fisher-Wright. So those are some books that, again, kind of highlight this idea of a new type of leadership culture And I've seen leaders struggle with this. Good leaders with great ideas, leaders who are men of character, and yet have not embraced this culture in which we live today, and as a result have really struggled as leaders because people are not just saying yes sir, no sir, doing what they tell them to do and following along. Because they're not, they've struggled. They've struggled to build that kind of team, that kind of coalition around the ideas that they have. And sometimes they're really great ideas. And yet, because they haven't been able to develop the team and the team building skills, it's been a struggle. So I'm really thankful for all of my teams. I mean, the reality is that there's no way that I could do a tenth of what I do if it weren't for my teams. And I am thankful for Tonwea and Judy Sherman, for Johnny and Alice and the team in Detroit. They're just doing some incredible work there. I'm thankful for what God is doing in that place, building a strong team, a strong culture. It's a great place. It's a place that people want to be part of. And it's an exciting place. There's some good things happening there at Awake Cafe and New Beginnings Fellowship. Just super excited and so thankful that I get to be a little part of that. We've got a great team here at Victory Acres, and I'm thankful for Matthew and Kiera. I'm thankful for Brother Eddie Chapman. I'm thankful for Brother and Sister Reynolds and just a whole host of volunteers that help us here. I'm thankful for our team at the gathering at Victory Acres. And our congregation is just a wonderful blessing. It's just a great team to be part of. I'm thankful for the team that I have here at home, and my wife, all of my children. You know, every time we tackle a big project together as a family and we do it together, I'm just amazed at the team that God has given me, and I am so thankful. They are so different. Every single one of my children are incredibly different, but they are each one uniquely gifted by God in special ways. And so trying to see how I can continue as a father to add value to their lives and continue to help them to grow into what God wants them to become is just really a special thing. And then the team at EFM. I'm really thankful for Stephen Gibson and his leadership at Evangelistic Faith Missions. Thankful for Nolan and Joya Taylor, thankful for Keith Shaper and all the rest of all of our missionaries that are serving in all kinds of really challenging places, and really just thankful to be a little tiny part of what God's doing there at EFM. It's exciting to be part of that and to be a part of the team, but to be a team member and to add value to each one of those teams and to be able to see it grow and develop and blossom means that, you know, I get to have a piece in that. But the reality is that there's no way I could do that by myself in any of those places, let alone all those places. And so I'm thankful for the Urban Ministry Division, the good work that's going on in Indianapolis, even though we're not there, the good work that's going on in Cincinnati, the good work that's going on in Detroit. I'm thankful for the ways in which God is using each of those teams in each of those places. The reality is, as a leader, you know, people may look on and say, wow, that's an amazing work. Well, it is. It is an amazing work, but it's not a work that I'm doing by myself. It's a work that there's a great team making happen. And that's the only way that it could happen, is if there was a team. And so I just want to encourage you as a leader. I don't know where you're at in all this, but if you are struggling with people not just following along and doing what you tell them to do, many times I find that a lack of followership really comes back to a lack of leadership. If people are not willing to follow you, there may be a reason, and you may need to look in the mirror. It may not be the ideas that they're reacting against. It may be that you're not recognizing that we're in a new day and we're going to have to lead in a new way. So continuing to learn and to grow. I love the illustration that I heard one time. There was a man who came to a wise pastor, and he said to him, I have a dream that I am the leader of 10,000 men. And the very wise man said, now all that is left is for 10,000 people to dream that you are their leader. The reality is that if people aren't following, then we're not leading. And in order to have that kind of leadership, to have that kind of influence, people have to be willing to trust us. They have to be willing to buy in to what it is that we believe and what it is that we're doing. In a day where leadership has been greatly misused, mishandled, I don't think that we can just hope that people are going to just assume that we're going to do the right thing. We need to provide things honest in the sight of all men. We need to do our homework. There needs to be more in the stock room than there is in the showroom window. And so I want to challenge you as a leader to do the hard work of developing yourself and of managing yourself well and continuing to build and to grow. Don't try to do great things. Do small things and do them well, and continue to love the people that God gives you to love, and continue to mentor and disciple and develop the people that he places around you. I remember early on in my ministry complaining to God, Lord, why won't you give me this person and this person? I looked around and saw some really talented people that I would love to have on my team. But there were a couple of young men at that time that were faithful. They didn't necessarily present well. They weren't always upfront sort of people, but they were there. And I remember God really just chastising me a little bit and saying, don't despise what I've given you. And I think that many times we may want the team that we don't have, but what we need to do is to learn to play with the team that God's given us. Learn to invest in them, develop them, practice with them, grow with them, love them, be with them. And so that's where I'm at right now. I'm trying to do that. It's not always easy because people are people wherever you go, and they all have problems and they all have challenges. They're not machines. And so to really take time for them and to work through their problems and to hear them and to do all those things, it'd be a lot easier to just, fire them and find somebody new. But what you've got to do is be willing to take the time, invest the time in the people. That is how the team is built. And that is how the work is done. So I am not any expert on this, but I know that culturally today, this is a new day. And I'm recognizing that because I'm one of those guys in this new day who always frustrated Dr. Robert England, president of Union Bible College, as I would walk into his office. And we had many long talks, probably a lot more than we should have had. But as I would question this or ask about that and bring things to him. But I remember many times in those conversations being so frustrated because instead of him hearing what I was saying and trying to validate the point that I was bringing to him, much of what he said to me was some version of, Eric, I would never have thought of walking into the president's office at the college that I attended and telling him anything or asking him these kinds of questions. Basically, what in the world are you doing here? And for me, I felt like these were questions that were valid. They're questions that needed to be asked. And even though I was just a student, I still felt like that I needed to make my voice heard. And so I did. And that frustrated him because in his worldview, it was like, look, I'm the leader. This is the decision we're making. Deal with it. And that's not the world that I was living in. I grew up learning how to ask questions and not just accept what a leader said as this is what we're going to do. That's the way I grew up. And my parents welcomed questions. They encouraged us to ask questions. And so I did. And it wasn't ever that I wanted to be disrespectful. They weren't in favor of disrespect, but they were encouraging us to think things through. We have endeavored to raise children to think critically without being critical. And there's a fine line in there. But I think especially in this day and age, it is not wisdom for us to just say, sure, whatever the leader says, yes, let's do that. And so continuing to try to develop as a leader, to build our team, and to continue to be the kind of leader that people can trust. Those are some thoughts for today, for Gleaning and Gathering. God bless.